Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 6, no hope difficulty, no life cube loss walkthrough, and this is chapter 4 of Chris's campaign. Now, compared to chapter 3, which was just filled with a lot of bad designs, the number of bad designs present in chapter 4 are a little less, but they're still annoying nonetheless. In fact, there is a really bad design at the very beginning of this chapter. So, after I clear out the first couple of enemies, and I also clear out the snipers, there's a moment where you're supposed to walk forward in order to trigger a cutscene that shows Carla walking away. But the thing I don't understand is when you exit the cutscene, it spawns in enemies directly in front of you. Like, you'll notice right now, there are no enemies present. Yet, when I go forward, the game is going to put me in a set position and spawn enemies directly in front of me. And the amount of times I tried to run away from these enemies and they just kept knocking me over because they were placed so close to me and I had no way of fighting back initially. It's just stupid. But here's this cutscene, so here's Carla just walking away. There are no enemies running around, you just cannot see them. Then it fades to black, and then magically they're there. And I could have been down just then, but I got very lucky. And even if I was to push on the right hand side of this hangar, the game would have still spawned me in that position. But you gotta run away from those enemies, and you need to go on this side, because for some reason, they don't try to chase you when you're on this side. I mean, either that, or they're taking a very long path in order to get to me. But I trigger this checkpoint right here, and this spot right here isn't so bad. Like, if the enemies were forced to transform on that first initial cutscene, then it wouldn't be so bad. Like, these enemies right here, they always transform whenever they get close to you, because these particular variants of the Joavo have the ability to transform at will. And they like to do that more so than actually using their guns, which I think is a really good design because mutated Joavo are nowhere near as bad as the guys with guns. However, if the enemies decide to mutate into the shield variant of the Joavo, and they get a shield mutation on their arm that is not holding the gun, then it's going to be a little bit of a problem. But it's not too bad because you can still get rid of the shield guys easily. And that right there is a unique animation that for some reason needs to be triggered under very specific circumstances. And the circumstances in question are, you need to make sure that that enemy is facing with its head down, like just flat on its stomach, and then you have to make sure that there isn't any geometry in the way. It has to be very spacious around the enemy in order to trigger that unique stomp kill animation. And that is the best way to get rid of that enemy. And you might have noticed that I slid into that enemy while it was running in order to knock it over. That's the only way to knock over that enemy while it's running. But you need to be very careful if you decide to do that because it's very specific on the timing. If you slide into that enemy during the intermediary animation between the point where it's first starting its startup frames and then actually running towards you, you will not hit the enemy, and it will just hyper armor through your slide and just grab you. And if you get grabbed by that enemy, it's an instant down. So that's one thing you gotta bear in mind if you're planning on sliding into that enemy. If you're playing as a female character, you don't have to resort to sliding in order to knock over that enemy properly. You can just use the running kick, because when you hit an enemy from the front with the running kick, it will always cause them to lie face down on the ground. And that is especially handy when setting up that enemy to being instantly killed by that stomp animation. And the cool thing about that stomp animation is that you get iframes. During the normal stomp animation, you do not get iframes, but during that particular animation, you do get iframes. It's just you still gotta be very careful if you're deciding to do that animation when there are multiple enemies around, because they'll just stack attack animations on top of you and just hit you the moment you come out of that animation. But we're now on this checkpoint right here, and there are going to be two snipers right in front of you as you're making your way over to this white marker. And you need to use your grenade launcher or just get into cover and use your sniper rifle, because these snipers are a pain in the ass, because of course they have the ability to instantly quickshot you with their sniper rifles. It's bullcrap. And I find it funny because the very first snipers that we encountered, they don't have this ability to quickshot. They have to aim for a couple of seconds, and the thing is that the bullets on those snipers, they have travel time because they're at longer range, only for those three enemies, but it doesn't work the same with these other snipers. So that's why you need to get rid of these enemies as quickly as possible. And that's why I used the grenade launcher just then, because these enemies were proving to be an absolute nuisance. But now we're moving on to the sequence where we're going to be separated from Piers. And you and Piers are going to be encountering your own group of enemies. I'm going to just sit in the back area and just let the enemies come to me. And while they're busy coming to me, I'm going to shoot them. Because the enemies on this game, they can't seem to shoot you unless they're in the right range for shooting you. This doesn't apply to all enemies, however, because there are certain placements of enemies that seem almost scripted in the fact that they're supposed to be standing still, or they're just supposed to be taking shots at you from a longer range. But other than those, you can still reliably use this method to prevent the enemies from being so active in trying to shoot you. But you'll notice that there is a ledge that the enemies are jumping over. If you shoot the enemies and they fall off that ledge, they will actually go over the piers, or they will actually climb the ladder that you use to get up here. So if you are knocking off the enemies, you'll want to check your back occasionally to make sure that the enemies aren't sneaking up on you. And if you're playing on co-op with a human partner, you're going to make it a little bit harder for the person playing as Piers. I'm not too sure if Piers' enemies can actually come over to where I am. I know Fascinator confirmed that your enemies will actually go over the Piers, but I don't know if the inverse is true. But right now, I'm just getting rid of the enemies. That guy transforms into a cocoon, so he's going to eventually turn into a pod, but I'm just going to skip him. And we're going to be doing a sequence very similar to Chapter 1 of this campaign, where Piers was trying to protect you while you were doing this hanging sequence. And I end up taking damage on it, unfortunately, but I think that's my fault, because I didn't wait for Piers to set up in the spot where he's supposed to be sniping these enemies. If I had waited, maybe he would have been able to save me from those enemies. But I go a little too soon on this hanging sequence just to get it over with. But that's a big mistake on my part. And I couldn't restart because at the time I assumed it was just a random sequence. But now that I think about it, I didn't wait for Piers. So don't make my mistake. Just wait for Piers to set up near the missile before you actually start the sequence. And these snipers are going to do a lot of damage to me, so that right there was 3 life cubes worth of damage. It's just so insane that the sniper rifles can do that much damage, yet they fire so quickly. It's a staple of many games to have the most damaging attacks be the slowest to prep, because that's the whole point. That's how you balance out such damaging animations. But with the snipers, they didn't really consider that, or they just completely missed it in Q&A, which seems rather baffling to me that they would miss something as obvious as that in Q&A. But what can you do? Not every issue can be corrected in Q&A, because fixing one issue might cause other issues in the game. That's why games like Alien Isolation are especially buggy. And if you haven't seen my Alien Isolation walkthrough, I go into a lot of detail about the kind of problems that I encountered in Alien Isolation, and Alien Isolation is probably the buggiest console game I've ever played, because it just wasn't optimized properly, and I think there were just a lot of problems in development, or maybe something happened in the development cycle of that game that just saw a lot of people lose their jobs. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what happened, or how they could really do that with that game. Oh, right here, this is really stupid. This is another example of a cutscene screwing you, because this plane can shoot you so fast that oftentimes you just don't have enough time to dodge, and even when you successfully dodge the plane, there are times where you can get shot by these LMG guys so easily. So you have to spam dodge like crazy and go to the left or dodge forward, or I don't know, like I don't know which direction is the best because of the LMG guys. All I gotta say, guys, is you gotta get lucky. And getting rid of this plane is a real pain because it moves around a lot, and there's no telling if it's going to track you or Piers. And it moves so fast that it's oftentimes very difficult to set up in a very good power position to hit it. And you have to set up slightly above it so that you can actually hit the guy who's piloting the plane. But this is a little risky what I'm doing right here. I'm trying to push past these LMG guys, but this is definitely not the best. I could have been hit easily, but I was very lucky that the LMG guys were prioritizing Piers. Oh, I'm just going to make a mad dash for the door. Okay, this is a very interesting choice that I decided to do. I don't recommend doing this. This is very risky. And I'm at least going to be able to trigger the checkpoint when I get over here. So, there we go. And then I'm just going to run past the enemies right here, because they never try to push towards you whenever you're on the door. And don't worry about the plane. The plane can't hit targets that are above it. It's only able to hit targets that are at level with it. And I'm glad I'm doing this, because trying to waste my time killing all those enemies in almost Call of Duty-like section, because that's just the Call of Duty way of dealing with every single Call of Duty game, it just drags the scenario out. I mean, if I used my sniper rifle and I was just sniping these enemies before I actually triggered the cutscene, then I probably wouldn't be dealing with so many enemies, but I still think the game spawns in additional enemies after the cutscene is done, so I don't know how much it changes the flow of the encounter if you decide to snipe those enemies in the beginning before you actually trigger the cutscene. But that's done, and now we're just doing some close quarter encounters in some very narrow areas. So before you enter this room, you'll want to clear out the two enemies in here, because if you proceed too early into the room, a bunch of spider Juavos will come out of that door, and it'll make it very hard to set up in the correct position to deal with them. But that guy's mutating into the spider Juavo, and I'm just going to use a grenade on the rest of them, and the grenades are very powerful against the spider Juavo whenever they're not on the ceiling and they're on the ground. Whenever they're on the walls or on the ceiling, they don't seem to die instantly from the grenade. They instead just have their HP diminished to about 1 HP, and then you're able to instantly kill them using your guns. But now I'm just going to make my way over to the next area, and I'm going to make a mistake right here because I used my grenade launcher a little too frequently, when in actuality I should have been saving my grenade launcher for the encounters in Chapter 5, because there are so many enemies you're encountering in some of the encounters in Chapter 5 that you need the grenade launcher to balance out those sections. And while you can get lucky with some grenade launcher drops from the crates, grenade launcher rounds are especially rare on this difficulty whenever you're trying to get them from crates. That's why I highly recommend that you save the excess grenade rounds from the second chopper boss fight from Chapter 3 for these upcoming encounters. But these close quarter encounters, they're not too bad so long as you're taking them nice and slowly. Flash grenades are especially handy because there are going to be a couple of moments where the enemies spawn so close to you that if you don't have a flash grenade, it's especially difficult to keep them off of you. Like for this upcoming encounter right here, after I clear out these enemies, there's a moment where a bunch of enemies are going to bust through a window and also come through the doorway that you used to get in that room. And they're so close to you that there is really no other way to get past those enemies unless you use a flash grenade. And also right here, I highly recommend you use the acid rounds because acid rounds are pretty useless in this game. Grenade rounds and nitrogen rounds are far better than acid rounds, although nitrogen rounds are very, very rare. They're the rarest drop in this game, I believe. You can probably only get them from like one crate, and that's really it. But on repeat playthroughs, I've only gotten nitrogen rounds like one playthrough out of so many of my repeat playthroughs. But this is the section right here, so prep a flash grenade the moment Piers gets into this room. They're going to spawn from here, so throw a flash grenade right now, and be very careful of that. I don't recommend standing in that spot. I highly recommend you stand near the window so that the enemies aren't so close to you, because I could have been melee just then. And now I'm just going to clear out the rest of these guys. All pretty simple when they have mutated arms or mutated anything. And there's just one guy left, and now I'm just going to get rid of him. And that is the end of this encounter. And now we're going to make our way over to the next section, which is a section involving Las Scalpangi, because of course Las Scalpangi are present in every single campaign. Only, I do feel like the quality of this upcoming Las Scalpangi section is a little less compared to Leon's campaign. I think Leon's campaign... Oh no, I'm sorry. There's not the Las Scalpangi section. There's this section right here. So, there's a bunch of Spider Juavo, and the Spider Juavo, they're very slow to react for some reason on this part. Flash grenades can be helpful here. Grenades are especially helpful for diminishing their HP. And aiming for their heads can be very handy. Of course, if you're wanting to counter them, go for it, but not when there's multiple Spider Juavos around, because they can easily down you when given the chance. Now there's going to be a Gnezlo, but you can just run past this Gnezlo. Now, this mantle point detection right here, it's a little odd. You have to kind of touch it, and then just wait for the prompt to appear. And then there's this cutscene, so the Gnezlo is moving during this cutscene, so I'm just going to run. And thankfully, Piers is very swift when it comes to getting over to you. He doesn't seem to get caught by that Gnezlo most of the time. And now we have this upcoming encounter right here, where there's going to be a bunch of mutated Juavo in the way. And you're also going to be seeing this variant where when you shoot the head off of one of these Juavo, they have the ability to go into a berserk status where they just keep swiping their arms. And they can do this alongside other mutations. Like right now, this guy's mutated into the head variant, and he's going to keep swinging his mutated arm. And the best way to kill this enemy is to counter it. Although, if you're not wanting to take the risk, you can just knock this enemy over and just stomp it, because you can still instantly kill this enemy with a stomp to the head. Now there's going to be a couple of enemies right here. Flash grenades can be very helpful here. Normal grenades can be helpful here as well because the enemies like to take cover behind these terminals. So those grenades will at least flush them out. That variant right there is coming towards me. So now I'm just going to take him out. The one that's the easiest to predict is the one where he swings with his right arm and he goes from right to left. Like his right to his left. Because that one just seems to have a better timing on it. Like, I can easily predict that attack. The one that goes from left to right is a little bit harder to predict for me. But there's a couple of more enemies when you push into this room. I still have a couple of grenades. And Piers is going to be somewhat helpful, but not really. Acid rounds can also be helpful here. There's not much I can really say about this, because you have a lot of weapons at your disposal. Just try to use them to the best of your ability, and that right there, at least the enemies can get screwed by the cover. It's nice that that exists, because the enemies already have a lot of cheap advantages, but for them to just put themselves into a disadvantageous position whenever they go into that cover is very handy. And then when Piers goes on the wheel, a bunch of these Fiery Drove are going to spawn in. You don't have to kill them, you can just wait them out, because Piers is pretty quick to open this. And now we're going to actually proceed onward to the Lascala Banji section. So, I know a lot of people hate the Lascala Banji on this game, but I think they're a pretty cool enemy, so long as they aren't being so bullcrap, because this enemy type, it's very, very easy for this enemy type to screw you whenever it comes to cutscenes. If there's one enemy type you're going to get screwed by the most when it comes to cutscenes, it's going to be this enemy. And this enemy is so fast that you have to be very, very careful when it comes to running past this guy. Like, he has the fastest grab I've ever seen in the entire Resident Evil series, where he does this side grab that catches you as you try to run past it. And the best way to get past him is to slide, and there are a couple of different variations to the Lascala Banji. So the main body one is the one that is a little bit easier to predict. But the other ones are a little bit harder, because when you bisect this guy, like you split him into his upper torso and his lower torso, his upper torso is probably the most dangerous variant because it's so fast, and the lower torso one is quite a nuisance because it has the ability to emit acid, and the acid, it lasts for a very long time, and it also has a kick move. It's pretty dangerous. But this part right here, if you trigger this cutscene and there are Lascala Banji present, the Lascala Banji will despawn, but there are times when they don't, so I highly recommend you restart the checkpoint. That way you're only dealing with this guy. And now you just need to wait out this entire encounter right here. And you'll also want to keep a safe distance from this guy, because there's another cutscene that plays whenever it opens the door, and the Lascala Banji can attack you during the cutscene. And also the Lascala Banji has the ability to throw its arms at you. There are a couple of hot pots around here that I believe you can use to destroy these arms. And you might be wondering what the whole advantage is to destroying the arms. Well, when this enemy grabs you, it has a very difficult QTE sequence to do when it has both of its arms. But when you keep destroying the arms on the Lascala Banji, when it grabs you, when it doesn't have its arms, the quick time event is a lot easier to shake out of. That's something that Fascinator told me, and it's a very helpful method for making sure that it's easy to escape the grabs if your partner isn't anywhere nearby. But this next passcode that we need to get, it's really dumb the way this works, because not only do you have to deal with this one Lascala Banji that is right near the passcode, but you can get attacked very easily by this Lascala Banji whenever you're trying to open the door, and the AI is so slow to get to the door that you'll probably need to restart the checkpoint in order to ensure that this Lascala Banji that is coming up isn't going to attack you so easily. And also to make sure that your AI partner is right near the door. So I'm just going to dodge to the right, and I'm going to pick up the passcode, and I'm just going to restart the checkpoint. And whenever you restart the checkpoint, the Lascala Banji will always try to do that grab that is pretty easy to get past, and your AI partner will always be right near the door, and there's no Lascala Banji putting pressure on them. Now we're just going to make a mad dash for the next passcode. By the way, you cannot kill these enemies. There's no point in trying to deal with them. You can incapacitate them and get ammunition from them and also skill points. But other than that, you cannot kill these enemies. Not even incendiary grenades can kill this enemy, even though it's supposed to be weak to fire. Although there's no point in even mentioning that, because you don't get incendiary grenades on Chris's campaign. You get flash grenades and just normal grenades. But when you do stun a Lascala Banji with the incendiary grenades, it puts it into a very hard stun, and it exposes the parasite that's inside. So you'll be able to deal increased damage to the Lasca Banji, but you won't be able to instantly kill it, unfortunately. It still incapacitates it. But, I do like the idea of this enemy. I like the music that plays. I think it's one of the most intimidating pieces of music in this game. And I do find these enemies to be a lot more intimidating than any enemy from Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 2 Remake, because those enemies are just laughable. I mean, it does suck that you get screwed by the cutscenes a lot with this enemy, but I think the whole concept of this enemy is pretty cool. And we now have this sequence right here where we need to make one last stand against the Lasca Banji, where we need to shoot these body parts before they land on top of us and knock us into the molten steel down below. And I at least have the assault rifle, and the assault rifle is very damaging. I don't recommend using the shotgun because the shotgun has a slightly lower rate of fire, especially given that it's slow motion. Using a machine gun or a pistol is very handy for the sequence. And the thing I don't like about these kind of sequences, and this is also the case with that one sequence in Chapter 1, where you have to save that hostage before she gets killed by the Juavo, is that the game doesn't seem to preset certain aspects of your character. Like, for instance, with the camera perspective, I had a moment in Chapter 1 in one of my other recordings where my shoulder was around my left shoulder, and it didn't bother putting my shoulder on the right-hand side, so I nearly got the hostage killed because of the fact that the game didn't properly preset my conditions. So I imagine that same kind of problem will be present in that Lasca Banji section, but I don't think it's too much of a big deal because it at least goes into slow motion and you have plenty of time to adjust yourself, so don't worry about it. But we now have this other change to the gameplay style, which for some reason people hate. I don't know why people say the controls are bad in this sequence. The controls are perfectly fine. It's just the one problem that I do have with the sequence is when you dodge a missile, there are times where the missile can still attack you even after you've done the dodge. You see that just then? Even though I successfully dodged the missile, it looped back around and it hit me. And thank God it doesn't instantly kill you on this part. But I think the missiles are coming from the choppers. If you're not actively killing these choppers, they will keep firing missiles. Or it's probably the anti-aircraft artillery guns. I don't know. I don't know what's causing these missiles. I assume it's the choppers. That's probably why they're highlighted in red. Oh, and also this is stupid. So you can get screwed by these cutscenes. So if you happen to be flying towards this carrier and the cutscene plays, you're still moving during the cutscene. So there are times when you can accidentally die during these cutscenes because you can't control Chris. It's something that happened to me during one of my live streams of Resident Evil 6 when I was playing with Cross Rage. So always make sure that you are flying parallel to the carrier and not flying towards it when you are trying to dodge the missiles, because Pierce is able to fire his weapons independent of what Chris is doing, which is really good design, and it makes destroying those anti-aircraft guns a lot easier to do. But we need to protect Pierce right now, so lay down suppressive fire on that area right there to stop the enemies from ganging up on Pierce. And Pierce has done the first bomb. Now we need to defend him from snipers and a couple of other enemies. Although on this recording, the only enemies I come across for this second bomb are the snipers. The ground guys, for some reason, don't show up. Most of the time, there will be ground guys who will be trying to distract Pierce from what he's doing. And you can see that red barrel right next to Pierce. It's for those enemies. And I have no idea why they don't show up here. But here comes the snipers. And you'll notice that I aimed prematurely at that spot. I mean, I don't know if this is the best thing you should do, because the ground guys, I think they come from that same spot where I was previously shooting at. So you might want to lay down suppressive fire in that area just in case, because dealing with these snipers is pretty simple. And Pierce has now done the second bomb. And now, instead of Juavo, we're going to be dealing with a lone Augerman, who is very easy to deal with. And it is especially important that you lay down suppressive fire on that Augerman and stop it from getting close to Pierce. Because something stupid happens, and I encountered this in one of my older playthroughs of Resident Evil 6 when I was playing with some other person. But during the victory cutscene, which shows that the missile has been deactivated, if the Augerman is close to Pierce during that cutscene, because he's able to move during that cutscene, it will cancel that cutscene out, and it will transition into the death animation. So you have to really make sure that you are laying everything you've got into this Augerman to stop it from killing Pierce. Although, because the AI is controlling Pierce, they have no problems with doing these QTE sequences compared to what a human partner might experience. So that's why I came across that issue a lot, because I was playing with a human partner. So yeah, to anyone who's saying that the AI should suffer just as much as you do when it comes to these kind of sequences, I just want to know what you're drinking, because I just don't know why people believe in such arguments like that without fully realizing how much of an impact such a bad design choice like that has. Like, imagine if that particular issue happened to the AI and they had just as much trouble as you do when it comes to doing these QTE sequences. Like, you would never be able to survive. You would just constantly die every time. But the only thing left to do now is to kill this Augerman and then try to take out the missile, only it's not going to work and the missile's going to fire, and that will cue the beginning of Chapter 5. I don't know why Chris and Pierce don't just try to circle around this guy and just take out the missiles that way. It just seems kind of time-consuming to take out this guy. They could easily circle around him, but I guess Capcom didn't really think that through when they were designing this, or maybe Chris and Pierce are just so desperate to take out this guy in order to get to the missiles that they're just not able to see the easy path, because of course survival is all about instinct rather than logical thinking. But once this guy is dead and the cutscene plays, this will cue the end of Chapter 4. Before I conclude the commentary, I'm going to showcase the blooper section, and these are issues that I encountered while I was recording this whole entire section. And there's 3. So the first thing I encountered was the issue where the enemies spawned in front of me and I couldn't get away in time, so I got knocked over after this cutscene. So I'm sure I don't need to explain to you why this is so poorly designed. And then we have this section right here, where I get quick shot by the sniper. See that? That is bullcrap. And then this right here, I get screwed by the animation that plays whenever the ship sways. I didn't even realize the ship could sway. But it's never swayed for me whenever I'm making my way towards the passcodes. Why I decided to do it just then, I don't know. But there's no reason to put in such animations, especially when the enemies don't get affected by that whatsoever. Why would you put in an animation that affects you, but not the enemies? It just leads to them getting a cheap advantage over you. And there's really no justification you can give as to why that should be allowed to be a thing in a game. But anyway, stay tuned for the final chapter of Chris's campaign. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.